Okay, so let's walk through step 2 of the install of VS Code in Git and creating a folder. This is a re-recording of this video because it messed up because I didn't have my OBS settings correct. So learn, learn, learn. So in this case, go ahead and go to these two websites, which I already have open, and VS Code will automatically start downloading. But with Git, what you're going to want to do is choose based on the version of your operating system, and you can generally just go to your system and figure it out. But most modern computers are 64-bit Windows setup, but you can also do a mobile if that's what you want. It's really based on what your computer is, and like I said, most relatively new computers should be 64. Okay, so now I've downloaded these two already. I'm going to go to my downloads folder and I'm going to go ahead and install. Now, does it matter which one you install first? Nah, not really. But I'm going to go ahead and install Git. Um, in this case, yeah, I have to give it the OK to install it. There used to be several other settings when you installed Git to have selected, but seems like based on from the last time I had to install this until now, they've made this process pretty straightforward. And so when you Git is we're using GitHub, right? But Git is a locally installed, just the version control, and that's why we need it in our local setup, right? So we can launch Git Bash. I'll show you how to have that in the terminal in a minute, but I'll just go ahead and hit finished here. And then select the app to open. Actually, we'll do this. I'm not sure why it asked me that. I may have accidentally clicked something, but always VS Code. You can see I've already installed it. And I'm going to say always, but oh, actually, that's why. It was trying to give me some notes. So let's go ahead and go now to the VS Code install. Okay, so I'm going to go here. I'm going to accept the agreement because I read every single bit of it. Unfortunately, that is kind of a joke. Now, open, you have options here. If you're somebody who likes to run from the command line, you can open with code there as well. I typically keep just the selected, and you do want to have the path updated. But in this case, go ahead and just let it do the install. Okay, so now that the install is almost done of the two apps, not while, it's actually going pretty fast, so I can just sit here and watch the progress bar tick away. Remember, this is only for those students selecting local. If you're selecting CodeSpace, you don't have to do this yet, unless based on the course you're in, you are asked to do it. Go ahead now. Okay, so now it actually did release. What was the release? Git gave me some release notes. That's actually something new I hadn't seen. So this actually launches VS Code locally in this case, right? Intended for trust the Windows, yeah, and enable, right? So actually, in this case, I'm probably going to come back to that because I think we're going to see it again. Oh, interesting. It's running in restrictive mode. Windows is not trusted. Yeah, so that's actually something we're going to do when we set up the folder. Okay, so one of the things, now that we have these two installed, one of the first things you can do is create this folder, right? So right now there's no folder that we have. Now when we clone, we're going to actually create what looks like subfolders, but are cloned from GitHub, but you're going to do that now. So I'm going to go ahead and hit open folder. Now you could also do this from wherever you want. Just this is a standard folder creation. Now it's going to drop into Git. This is not where I want mine. I'm going to go to documents. And in documents here, even though I've said select, I'm going to actually do a new folder. And up here in Windows, and again, if you're using Mac, there's on Finder, you can do this as well there. I'm just going to do inside documents. Now you can put this base folder wherever you want. I do recommend using them, especially if you're taking multiple classes, because you end up, if you're taking multiple classes, creating the same name of repo. So you want to distinguish between the courses. So I'm going to do a new folder. And in this case, CIT. Oh, let's try that again. Documents. Oh, my keyboard is a little finicky. So I'm going to do capital CIT. And in this case, whatever course you're in. And I do like to specify, oh, thanks, Magic, right? And if for some reason like that, you get bopped out, you can just come back in and do a rename. And give it the semester and the year. That way, if I ever need to distinguish it, just make again. I don't tell you what to name this. This is only my suggestion. You will see this when you're on Canvas. And here, I will suggest the name for the course that you're in. Okay. I'll come back to this in a second. Let's just finish up over here. Okay, so now let me lower this as well. So now that I have that folder, right, and I can go ahead now and say click and then select that folder. Okay, and when I do that, then a VS Code actually should have asked me about the restricted mode, but it didn't. It may have been, and by the way, you may get an option here to say trust this, and you do want to do that. And probably the reason I didn't is I had actually already, this is a redo, and I had already logged in, created that folder, so it must have kept those. So my point is here, if you get here and you didn't you see something different like trust, do you trust, just you have to click OK. And now notice I'm no longer in restricted mode because evidently it had that. So this is the welcome to VS Code, your typical options that you would see when first opening it. And I'm going to for a minute just close this out, because what I want you to see is go over to, and depending on your resolution, you may not have to do these three dots like I did. Go to terminal and go new terminal. And what happens is I'd already played around with mine and changed it to Bash. Yours might be PowerShell. And you can use PowerShell, no problem if you're comfortable with that. Notice what happens here is it defaults to that base folder. And then the next step, you're going to actually go in and clone, so you'll have the two repos, the public and the private, listed here. You'll see me do that next. Okay, but one thing I want to say, Git, in this case down on the terminal, in terminal, and again I'm using Bash, you could use PowerShell. I would do Git, I think it's just version, I don't think it's dash dash. Sometimes it's, let's see if version gives it to us. It doesn't. So Git dash dash, it's either single or double, one or the other. So now it tells me, hey, and the reason I'm doing this is just to show you, yes, you have Git installed locally and you're ready to move on to the next step. But it's also good just to learn, right? I'm going to do a clear real quick to learn like PWD. You'll see me say that so you can see where this particular route in VS Code is open. That's something we'll talk about in any of the courses that you take, but specifically in 82 or 93. Okay, so, and then the other one is to change directory, right? So now, right now, I don't have anything underneath this, so I wouldn't do that. But also just getting used to playing around over here. You could set default profiles if you wanted to use Bash, because your system, like if I clicked over to PowerShell, let's see if I do, wow, my keyboard is the shortcuts. I'm loving it. Git dash dash version. Yeah, it works there as well. So if you're using Windows, you want to have at least this version loaded. Okay, let me just end this by saying a word about, if you're using Mac, which I do as well, I found the best way to install Git, because installing VS Code for Mac, no problem. But installing Git for Mac, a little more involved, okay? Because in this case, I found, especially if I'm on a new Mac, I just go down to the terminal, right, in Mac, and I run xcode dash select install dash dash space dash dash install, and that will install Git into my system. And it's not it takes a few moments here to do that. Now, an alternative I don't recommend, but is very common depending on your level of experience on Mac, you can do something called Homebrew, and you can install it through that kind of distribution system. Again, I provide this only here as FYI. I don't really recommend it. If you're using Mac, I just recommend doing this. But, I like to give students that there are other ways to accomplish it. So what you should have coming out of this video is you should have VS Code installed. You should have opened that base folder that you created. You should have had the trust that you didn't see on mine. I told you why. you should be able to get into a terminal, right? You should be able to drop into a terminal, maybe be able to, move if you want to. Like if I wanted to drop that terminal, right, I could do that. If I wanted to play around with set default profile, which I already did here, like if I went over to PowerShell and I said, hey, set default profile, then I could tell it, you know what, my PowerShell now is going to be my default. And if I do that, then if I go to terminal, PowerShell should be my default, but I don't particularly like. I'm not a big fan, and Bash is just something I've used for a long time. So probably what I would do here is just set my default to Bash. Okay, and now all that is because there's different terminal interface systems that you can use. Often they have some commonality, but also specific to what you're doing. PowerShell has definitely, I think, much more to the automation side. Bash is specifically for Git. Okay, so coming out of this video, you should have a base folder ready to do the next step. I hope this helps.